Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So today's topic is gonna be the latest iteration of my least favorite type of event in the game, that being the Deck of Fate, specifically the Adventure Deck of Fate. And you know what that means? The Adventure Deck of Fate always features gear pieces. That is the one consistent trend amongst Decks of Fate. So in this case, you can see the tag here that there's a lot of pinpoint gear up and through Mythical from Epic, up for grabs. Now, the biggest elephant in the room to address is that this Deck of Fate has absolutely nothing to do with Crowcad or Packmaster Shax. You don't have to worry about that. There's no guaranteed champion. There's no soul, which would be weird. That'd be the first time. But there's nothing associated with the fusion with this one. It's purely just for the sake of getting a decent amount of pinpoint gear. So for those who are unfamiliar with Decks of Fate, there are 40 cards in the deck of 3 different rarities, and it costs 1,000 currency per flip, meaning that in order to flip the entire deck, you would need 40,000 of this currency. In this case, behind my head, which you may or may not be able to see, but it is going to be Dungeon Divers plus Champion Training. So get artifacts and accessories, Dungeon Divers, and upgrading champions, i.e. Champion Training. So if we hop into the info tab, we can see the breakdown of all of the cards in the deck here. You see various rewards. So there's a lot of epic gear, there's a decent amount of legendary gear, and honestly, a decent amount of mythical gear here. So it would not be the worst thing in the world to go for this if you're highly concerned, I should say, with getting pinpoint gear. Now, in terms of the breakdown of the cards, you have 15 common, 14 rare, and 11 epics. And this is important to keep in mind, the 11 epics, because there is a pinning feature in this particular Deck of Fate. We'll come back to that in a second. But the primary gimmick of Decks of Fate are that if you get 3 of a kind in a row, then you can roll on these various tables depending on the type of cards, so the common, the rare, and the epic cards, and you can get any of these rewards on each of the tables. And the pinning feature, which is handy, you could kind of see it out here, but essentially the way that works is that you can pin the higher rarities, i.e. the rare and the epic cards, and preserve a streak, thus guaranteeing yourself a 3 of a kind of either of those types. Ideally, you would want to pin epic cards just so you can get those 3 of a kind, but if you happen to get all 3 rares in between getting epics and pinning the epics, that could be beneficial. But ideally, I would forego a rare streak in order to guarantee an epic streak. So that does mean that if you were to flip the entire deck, given that there are 11 epic cards, you are guaranteed to get 3 of a kind epics in your session there, meaning that you would get 3 of these rewards. You can get multiple of the same thing, but you would guarantee yourself 3 of these rewards if you're flipping the entire deck, which again could be substantial depending on what you happen to get and what resources you might have over the next few days. So we come down here, you can see the breakdown of the tables here. We'll digest this in a little bit more translatable format here, but this is the Dungeon Divers element here with this massive table, and then here's the Champion Training element. So if we hop over to the spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below, that has various tools like the Deck of Fate calculator, as well as all the fusion plans you may or may not have seen on the channel. But if we focus in on the relevant sections, we have the Dungeon Divers element here, which I will always say is the worst form of points for these types of events. However, in this case, because there is Champion Training involved, you will be getting some Dungeon Divers credit whilst you work on Champion Training, and I do recommend you focus solely on Champion Training. But if you want to run some dungeons occasionally here and there, they can also get you some points in terms of or efficient points in terms of points per run / points per energy. So in the Dungeon Divers element, we have the breakdown for each of the stages that most people are going to be farming from the mid game all the way through the end game. So normal mode stage 20 all the way up and through hard mode stage 10, and you can see the various average currency per energy spent. And so it could be more, or it is definitely most efficient to run stage 20 normal, but you can also see that there's an equivalency between normal 24 and hard 10, just because of the amount of the percentages of the rewards you might get. And then the most important part here, or at least for this particular Deck of Fate, is that you will also get credit for running the campaign if you're doing that for your source of Champion Training. In terms of Champion Training itself, we have that section up here, and we have 2 rows, which is a cumulative and per capita. Per capita means that this is the amount of points you're going to get from making each tier of chicken, and in some cases, like the 4-star and the 5-star chicken, where there is some credit for brewing them up a little bit, because that's typically what you would do before you feed your chickens into the next tier of chicken or 6-star champion. And then cumulative just means we're accounting for the fact that in order to make the higher tier of chicken, you have to feed in the lower copies of that. So it's accounting for that. So translation, if you wanted to get all 40,000 points, i.e. 4 flips, you would roughly need to make 4 6-star champions from scratch. But of course, along the way, assuming you're running campaign to do this, you're going to get a decent amount of credit from the Dungeodar's element, from the shields that you're going to get from running stage 12-3 on Brutal. And so it's probably going to be a little bit less, maybe 3 6-star champions plus a little extra, depending upon where you start. So when it comes to this particular deck of Fate, what is my plan going into it? I talked about it a little bit during yesterday's stream, and I said that I was kind of still on the fence about deciding whether or not to go for it, and I've ultimately decided that I'm just going to skip out on this one. I am not really in need right now to champion train. I have all my champions that I've needed to build up recently have already been 6-starred, and people in the queue were kind of like accessory champions, hard mode faction wars-esque champions. They're not like crucial to beating a next stage. They're just kind of on the back burner. And so there's no one really pressing that I need to level up immediately. And of course, on top of that, the Crocad fusion has just come to an end, meaning that there is going to be some break period where I have some free energy that I would rather spend on Minotaur, especially because they've finally introduced, at least temporarily, they've introduced super raids in Minotaur, and I want to spend as much energy as possible over the next couple of weeks while it's live in order to get masteries for my champions, the aforementioned champions that I maxed out fairly recently, and also just to prove to Plarium that even though they should know this, because we've been asking for it for years, that people absolutely do want permanent super raids in Minotaur. It would just make it, 2 times as fast, more or less, to farm masteries, and that's just good in terms of time saving. So I want to prove in terms of their, metrics that they're going to collect over the next 2 weeks that people do want this and people are doing this. So it's kind of two-pronged, but mostly it's just the fusion's over, and this is what I would be doing anyways, regardless of the super raids. But because there are super raids, I also want to take advantage of the fact that they're there. So yeah, pinpoint gear is awesome. The event dungeon, of course, is already closed. So the Chaos Awakes event campaign, whatever you want to call it, has already ended. So we won't be able to get pinpoint until it opens up with whatever the 4th iteration of the event dungeon is. But yeah, it would be nice to have more pinpoint gear, but it just doesn't feel worth it for me in the short term over the next 4 days. I'd rather be farming Minotaur while we have this break in between the fusions or some sort of Titan event. We don't know if that's coming down the pipeline as well. In terms of a formal recommendation for all of you, though, it depends, right? It depends. Do you really care more about pinpoint gear than I clearly do? Then champion training, it's accessible. Everyone can do it, and it's always going to be beneficial in most cases to progress your account, building out champions, building out epics, rares, legendaries, whatever you might happen to have or might need for whatever content you're trying to progress in next. It can always be valuable, and along the way, you may not flip all of the cards in the deck, but you might get a couple of streaks here and there. You have 10 flips, you might get 3 epics within that and get yourself a primal shard or something crazy, or you can just get a decent amount of pinpoint gear and see what the rolls are. I guess that's the other element of the randomness of the gear pieces. Like, you can get a bunch of flat stats and nothingness, and so you can spend all this energy and you can get a bunch of pieces that have terrible stats, or you need Chaos Order to re-roll them and they still have terrible stats. So it's not a guarantee that it's going to be like some, oh sweet, I got some HP percentage gloves that are quad speed or something. There's no guarantee that they're going to be good pieces. They're just random pieces, as random as if you were farming the event dungeon. But still, if the opportunity for getting the pinpoint gear is enticing to you and you do want to champion train, I do highly recommend it. Again, it's something that everyone has access to. And if not, then I do encourage you to also be farming Minotaur just to pad the stats and prove once again to player that we do want that permanent in the game. We basically had to do the same thing to get permanent super raids for the other areas of the game, so it's not out of the norm as far as their hesitance when it comes to this, but it's definitely been something we've been asking for a while. Or of course, just do whatever you want. It's free time, so you can spend your energy however you feel, but I do recommend spending it in Minotaur if you can. So yeah, that is going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Adventure Deck of Fate 2 for 2025. Let me know in the comment section down below what your plan is relative to this Deck of Fate. Are you going to be champion training, trying to go for as many flips as possible to get yourself some pinpoint gear, or are you going to be skipping it and farming Minotaur with me to pad these stats? As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and also feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you are enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.